Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're having a great April so far. It's been a little crazy with all the Kickstarters launching and all the games delivering lately that it's been hectic. However, I look forward to spending some time telling you about my thoughts and opinions on Black Rose Wars by Ludus Magnus Studios. Is it all perfect? Is it all good? Is it all bad? Let's find out. Okay, starting out with a positive here, the art direction of this game is fantastic. From the miniature design to the artwork to just everything all meshes together. Even the name of the spells, I think, just kind of create a very cool and interesting story. The fact that they put kind of a little bit of a story blurb for each of the characters and a little bit of even about the Black Rose Lodge itself is it's just a fascinating world that's implemented very well from fit to finish and everything in between. That you can tell that they had a vision of the kind of world and setting that they wanted to create, and that came out beautifully with all the components. So really, really happy about that. It's really good. Sadly, a negative is that a lot of those wonderful components and with all the art on them and everything aren't implemented well in the storage that they offer. Now, props to them for even offering a kind of a more realistic storage solution when it comes to the trays and the fact that there's spots for cards and tokens and whatnot. However, everything's just a little too tight. And what I mean by that is the trays for the miniatures, they clip in very hard where you can lift up an entire tray with the miniature locked in there. You could just like hold it attached to the tray. It's that bad. And so as a miniature painter, I can never use that tray. It is useless to me. And the fact it's a detriment to me, which is really unfortunate that they went snap in. I never liked that in any of my games. I suppose they did that because they have flat trays on top instead of the trays that have a formed dimple or, kind of, protrusion from the bottom to keep the miniature in place. So instead of having that, they just lock them in there. I much prefer the lid with a little bit more oomph to it than just the flat tray. And sadly, only 2 of the 3 trays have a lid on it. I don't know why there's not a lid on the third one, but there's not. I mean, it even has kind of the positions where you kind of lock it in there, but there wasn't any, so it just becomes loose every time. I have it actually stored up vertically right here, you can see, because it has some beautiful art that I'd love to put on display. However, every time I open that box, the miniatures in the middle have fallen out. So kind of unfortunate that not only we have snap-in, but even with the snap-in, they still fall out because not all of them are snapped in, even as good as some others. So pros and cons on both sides there. Additionally, the tokens really struggle to fit in. And what I mean by that is the round tokens, you really have to mash in there. I'm kind of okay with that, but I'd prefer, perhaps them either stacked up vertically in a corner or I don't know, something to where it's not quite as latched in there because you really got to push them in the last few. Kind of like, loading a gun or something like that. Additionally, the square, holes for the square, tokens. Don't put your miniatures in there. I've even had a commenter comment how they put them in there, and when they took them out the first time before even playing, they actually ripped their token in half and had to glue it together. That's how bad it is. It's almost as if they never even tried the tray after making it, or tried it, realized it didn't work, and shipped it anyway. I don't know what the issue is with that. I'm not quite sure how it's that bad, where it'll break your components. It's not the right size enough, but it's not. So don't put your square tokens in there. If you paint them, don't use the tray at all. If you do, cut out the clip part of it or create your own insert. Either way, it's a good effort, but it's really lackluster in pretty much its entire execution. Now, one good thing about having a storage tray or having any kind of organization inside the box is it can normally help with setup time. However, this game, because of all the components, take a while to set up. It has one of the longest setup times for any game I have. And I think that's for one main reason. The tokens go down easy when it comes to the board tile tokens, the little hexagons that you have. That's easy, that's fine. And the miniatures, putting that there and all that's great. What takes a long time is, first of all, divvying out all of the tokens just to the various players. But the longest point is definitely the library of spells. So you have 6 or 7 spell libraries, depending on if you have the Chrono expansion or not, plus you have the Forgotten spells. And not only do they all have to be shuffled, but first of all, they have to be separated. So once you separate them into the various pools, and each one has 2 grimoires, so then you have to leaf through there and build both grimoires up, and I need one of these and one of these, and so you're shuffling through the deck many times. Then after you make the grimoire, then you have to wait till everybody picks whatever grimoire they're starting with, and then shuffle the whole thing again. And so it takes a long time. It is a lengthy process. Perhaps I could get a little bit quicker if I memorize the grimoires, but you like turn over the little sheet and it says, oh, you get 2 of these spells and 1 of these and 1 of these and 1 of these. I think it's a 6 for each one. And so they have a ton of spells, which is great. I'm glad that they have a variety there, but you're just leafing through and you find, oh, here's Overload. Oh, here's Magic Eruption. Oh, here's, Meteor Storm or whatever the heck, all these are. So then you build that, and then you build the other one, and then you place the deck there. And then, after everybody picks, then you have to then shuffle it back in, which means you have to do it every time as well. And so you're constantly building these grimoires up. Putting it back is a lot quicker because you don't care as much for that. You just have to make sure not to have anybody's personal spells mixed in there. But it does take a while. I don't know of a way to avoid that. Perhaps if they marked the cards where this is Grimoire 1 and this is Grimoire 2 in like a corner so you could just leaf through and take them out and not even read the end, that would probably be quicker. It'd be something I'd suggest that they do in the future if they're doing something like this, is leave a little mark there. But either way, it does take quite a long time to set up. However, it's not all bad per se in the timing situation here, because while it might take a while to set up, once it's set up, you're set, you're good to go. And the downtime here is a huge positive. I actually did not find that much downtime. There's because the combat in between people isn't, as long as you don't have a trap or a protective spell activated, you could care less what other people are doing. They could even assign the damage to you. It doesn't really matter so much. I guess you could have some equipment if you have the myth spell. There's some scenarios like that where something can soak up damage, but in general, combat is very one-sided in that, hey, I did that to you, so now you take the damage. So you're not really invested as much in other people's turns, but they go quick because you're limited to essentially 2 actions. You can either move and activate and then do a spell, or you can do 2 spells, or you can attack and activate and then do a spell, or you can just do one of them. And so you're never doing more than 2 things at once in general. There are cards that'll allow you to do several actions like move and attack, and then if you can, move and attack again, and that's 1 spell. So maybe you moved and attacked, and then moved and attacked, and then you're doing another spell where you're doing something else. But either way, it goes quick. I mean, it goes around the table real quick, and I really like that. I don't like a game where I'm completely in downtime where I'm just twiddling my thumbs or spinning my chair or being completely bored while somebody else decides what it is they want to do. Because God forbid they think about it ahead of time, which also helps with this because you kind of have to think ahead of time. Because you lay out all of the cards, in an order, like, oh, I'm going to do this and do this. There's a little bit where you can react when it comes to, you can either shift what you're doing, especially with your physical actions. What you choose to do in your quick spell, you can kind of proc however you wish. But in general, you have a plan of the turn and you implement that plan. It's kind of a programmable sense in that way, but not really, though they can mess up. I mean, like a program thing, if you're planning on somebody being there and they end up moving to the other side of the board, it might mess you up. But that kind of going into like, hey, I'm taking a chance. And then ideally you've thought of, if that doesn't work, I'll do this instead. So it's not too bad. I really like the downtime in this game. It's really good. Now, this game has what is considered kind of like a questing system in a sense that you have 1 to 2 quest cards. Typically 1 unless you're actively trying to get 2. Otherwise, you just have 1. So you kind of have to go out of your way and devote at least an action of a turn to get a secondary quest. However, I wasn't that impressed with the quest system. It started out kind of okay, but as it gets farther along, they're worth more, which is great. But there's a very wide margin of difficulty in quests. And to the point where sometimes you get a quest and it's like, I can't do this. This is almost not going to be happening. Perhaps somebody had one where they have to go into a room and activate it. And instead of doing that, they get some other reward plus power points or something like that. And then you might hand one that's like, hey, you need to do like 7 damage this turn. And if you've set your whole turn up just to like build altars and get power points that way, you're not completing it that turn at all. And then you'll have to either forcefully do it next turn by changing your strategy that you were playing or swap for a new quest. And you might get another quest that says something, kind of just as, ridiculous. I got one where I actually had to complete 2 quests. So this quest, literally, I had to complete a quest and do something else to complete that quest. Whereas other quests, you just have to complete that quest. That's almost instantly harder, right? So there's some quests where you just have to beat one, and then another one where you have to beat a whole nother quest and then something else. And it's just kind of a bummer to see other people being like, oh, I activated this room, here's, 4 power points. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here with 1 quest where I have to devote a turn just to get another quest, just to complete that quest, and do something else just to get that quest. And it was only worth 1 power point more. Totally not worth it, just ignore it. And the problem is, again, to swap them out, you either have to, spin the turn to do that, which, helps the Black Rose War or whatever, or the Black Rose. So you either have one chance to get one different, and then if you get another bad one, then you have to spend an action to go to a room to get another one and swap it out, or just get a second one, or it just, I didn't like the questing system. It didn't seem balanced to me. There was a wide range of randomness and whether or not you're lucky or not on it. Definitely not something that you could do a strategy of doing it. So in comparison, I love the kind of quest system in Blood Rage, where you can actually just kind of focus on that and be like, you know what, I'm just going to try and complete quests. And that's a legitimate strategy to where you could even win doing that, or you could win through combat, or you could win through, the Loki strategy and being bad at combat. Or there's several different paths that you can do to try and beat the game, and quests is kind of integral to that. In fact, you should ignore it. You should at least do some. This seemed to me to where you can either try and do your plan, or you could try and do your quest. And if you have a bad quest, you can try and get rid of your quest and hope and pray that you get another one that's as easy as walking into a room and activating it. I'd much rather do 2 of those quests than one that takes me 3 rounds to be able to build up to, do 7 damage to, or something like that. I mean, it can be kind of rough in the quest department, so really disappointed in that. But the quests are really only one part of the game here, and it's a minor part too, mainly because, as far as I'm concerned, you can mostly ignore it. If you happen to do it, that's fine, but it's certainly not worth, not doing what you were going to do to get, if you're going to kill somebody, go kill somebody. You'll get 4 power points from that if you were really good at it and did the most damage. That's probably as much as a quest anyway, plus you hurt some other person as opposed to changing what you're doing just to get the quest. Anyway, I'm talking about quests again. The spells in this game are what this game is all about, and they are fantastic. Each school of magic in the library that is available acts so differently. I mean, some of them I could kind of compare to Magic the Gathering, oh, hey, that's definitely a blue deck, right? In fact, the blue deck illusion is kind of pretty much blue, but the purple's kind of like that too. I mean, you get a lot of, counter things and manipulation of the board and, just rooms and stuff like that, and, moving people strategically and having that. They play so different. So you can have destruction where all you're doing is, I'm just dealing damage, typically in an area of effect kind of way, whereas I'm just, hurting people all around me or in that entire room or something like that, which is really a lot of fun. But then you could also go, Myth from the Chrono expansion where, I'm just getting equipment, so I'm really bulked up and really strong. In fact, that's how I first played, is I did a transmutation, which is like close combat, but with the armor set from Myth so that I could, withstand a little bit more as I am getting up close and beating people up with, stone claws and whatnot. Or turning myself into Abomination. Or there's, the Illusionist, where you can teleport people to rooms and change the room colors and get power points based off that. Or there's some where you can choose a happy face or a sad face, like an opera kind of thing. And so you, essentially give another player a choice, hey, you can do this, and then I get this, or you can do that, and I get that, and stuff like that. It's each pool of Magic plays so different, and it's so exciting to be able to not only specialize in one, but then take a few others to kind of accentuate it or do more. Again, it's a lot like Magic the Gathering, where you can choose, maybe 1 or 2, but you could also technically get a whole bunch of various different ones, and that might still work. It just depends on how good you are at doing it. So the deck building and the comboing of this is really great. If you do play Magic the Gathering, it's very much like building combo decks. To where you're trying, because you're only playing 4 cards at once anyway, and you kind of have a limited pool, to where you're just trying to have ones that interact together. For instance, as an Illusionist, I did have one where I could teleport to somebody and attack them and then move them to another blue room or whatever, right? And so I did that, and then I had another spell that allowed me to change one room into blue and then get power points for everybody in blue. So I moved somebody to blue, and then in the same turn, then I was able to turn another room that had people in it blue and then get a whole bunch of power points. And that plays so much differently than somebody who's just destruction and just going after somebody, or somebody that's, doing altars and doing stuff with that, because even the pets, or the evocations are also fantastic. I'll get a little bit more on that later, but the spells are fantastic and really shine through and have a lot of thought into them, and they're really fun to use. And I can't wait to go back and read some of the cards and think about other combinations that would be fun and cool to do. Now, sadly, there is one pool of Magic that I was highly disappointed in. That's just because of the high barrier of entry, and that is the forbidden spells themselves. The forbidden spells, for those of you who don't know, are very powerful spells you can only get after you've played the game a certain amount, and you have to like discard 4 cards from your hand just to get one. They're one-time use, and then they're out of the game, and you can't reuse them again, but they are fairly powerful. However, I don't think the trade-off is worth it. None of us that played ever thought that building up to 4 cards in your hand just to discard them, just to get one spell that you can use once, was really worth it. And here's why. Like, for instance, there's a card in there that allows you to do 7 damage to one player. That's awesome. I could do over 7 damage if I played my cards right and the situation was right, just with the transmutation deck. Just by doing 2 Nature's Wrath, right? Plus 1. So I had one to where I could do 3 attack for each attack, and then I had a card that allowed me to attack twice. And I could do that twice. So I could be doing 6 damage twice to 2 different people for a total of 12 damage. I mean, so they're not clearly, I mean, they're good, don't get me wrong, but not worth giving up 4 cards, especially because building up your hand is kind of difficult. You have to specifically use turns to build up your hand by being able to draw cards, or choose not to have as good a turns so that you play them and you don't play all 4 cards when you draw 4 cards each turn. So you are using less spells, so you're building up a hand that way. Just to get the 4, just to be able to discard to get 1 that you use once that is probably about as much damage or less, or as useful or less as 4 spell cards that you've accumulated that can combo off each other. At least that's my opinion, and that was opinion actually not just of me, and I didn't mention it or anything like that. It just, everybody kind of leafed through and saw, okay, here's kind of the available options, and nobody decided that it was worth doing it. In fact, only one of us ever had 4 cards to be able to discard for it, because it's not something you're really trying to plan to do unless you are. So you kind of have to spend more than 1 turn, at least 2 whole rounds of you playing all of your cards, specifically trying just to get the forbidden rulebook, or forbidden spell, and even then, there are cards that can allow you to waste it. There are cards that, just say, hey, for instance, you could go to the arena and have somebody force their play their forbidden card. It might not, they don't know what the forbidden card is, but if they guess right, it's a forbidden card, and maybe you wasted it. You weren't in position for it, or it was kind of useless to do. Or maybe they make it to where, you reveal and cast it. There's a few that allow you to do that. And it's kind of unfortunate that either they weren't more powerful, or they were easier to get, or you could reuse them or something. I don't know. But to me, the trade-off wasn't worth it. And so they're kind of like this cool, shiny thing. But then you look at what you'd have to give up to do it, and you're like, I'd rather just focus on the tried and true stuff instead of hoping to get a forbidden spell that might be worth the 4 cards I no longer have. Just kind of unfortunate there. Now, another negative and a pet peeve of mine is that there's no index in the rulebook. Put an index in that thing. If you are at all watching this and you're involved in writing a game manual, a technical document that's at any length thick, or if your game is any sufficient complexity, and even if it's not, then it's an easy rule index to do, add an index to it. It's not a table of contents. It doesn't work. For instance, we wanted to read about what happens when a tile is destroyed, right? What happens when you destroy a room? Do the people on it die? Do they not? And I was like, well, you know what? Let's reread it so I know I'm correct, because I believe I am correct, but let's reread it. Now, where would you look that up? You can't look in the table of contents because it doesn't list destruction or destroyed room anywhere. So where would you look it up? It's actually under the cleanup phase. Now, if you don't know to look under the cleanup phase for a destroyed room, you're just going to be leafing through, hoping you find it, and eventually you will. We wanted to look up again when you could, and exactly what happened when you discarded a quest, because again, the quest system's kind of lackluster. Where is that at? It's not, there's no item that just says, in an index, oh, page 13 is where it discusses, quests. In fact, the whole discard quest is a tiny line at the very top of a page underneath a big example thing of unrelated stuff. And so if you just see the image and go past it, you're going to see, it took me a while to find it. If there was an index, I could have gotten to it like that. So put an index in there so people can actually use the rule book. That way it's usable, as opposed to me essentially rereading and skimming through the entire rule book every time I need to find anything that isn't listed under a header in the table of contents. Now, before I move off of the rule book, I just want to really kind of focus on presentation here, and just, I guess, how presentation reflects a tendency to believe how serious the company is. Now, Ludus Magnus Studios really worked hard on this game. I'm not saying that. I'm just talking about impression here. So when I read the rulebook, and I get that they're not native English speakers, but there are some things where even if it doesn't matter what language you're speaking. So there are a ton of typos, and I mean a ton. The most I've ever seen in any rulebook ever, by far, probably triple the amount or quadruple the amount that I've ever seen, if not more, than any other rulebook from any other company anywhere in the world that I have personally seen and had the pleasure of reading. Like, obviously bad. I'm not just talking typos like, it's worded weird, or there's an extra period, or I'm talking about whole missing letters, rearranged letters, words that are all the same, where they're all mashed together into one, so there's no space. Just a ton of issues that way. Additionally, there's a few times where it's just kind of odd. You can tell they rearranged things. Like, there's one where they're talking about, I forget the exact thing they're talking about. I'm gonna, be showing images here, but there's a point where they're like, hey, just be careful to really follow the, rules that are in the following paragraph. And then there's no following paragraph. They must have put it otherwise. I don't know. There's like a big example on the sheet, but it's not related to that at all. It's like the other thing you're talking about before the main thing. And then it starts a whole new section. And the whole new section, even if you look at that, maybe it's the next paragraph, the next section. No, it's like an introduction. That's like, it doesn't, it worries me that it's like, well, was there something important there? I don't know, because you just left the following paragraph and there's no following paragraph. Anytime you're using word like, following or before or above or below or any of those kind of movement words, you need to make sure that those are either only added after you're done rearranging stuff, or that they're moved with whatever it is you're moving. If you rearrange, just that's kind of unfortunate. Additionally, and this is kind of where it gets to the point where even if they just happen to have more typos than any other company I've ever seen write a manual, and like the Codex Arcanum or whatever, they even left in on accident some of the proofreaders and English proofreaders' notes in there. Like, it has the person's note. So again, I should be showing you an image of this right now, and it's literally talking about how, like, this is how I would word it. And it's like, that's not supposed to be there. None of the others are there. They just left it there on accident, and it just shows kind of a lack of polish. And it gives the impression, again, that they wrote this rulebook either early on, or they didn't care too much about the English translation, so they just shoved it through. But you don't want to ever appear like you're the chef that just moves food out of the kitchen regardless of how good it is, right? Especially if people spend $100 or more on this, you want to feel like you got something that they really cared about. And I'm sure they care about it, and I doubt they want that impression upon me. So it's unfortunate that happened, because there's some bad ones. It's all over the place. There's rarely a page that doesn't have at least one typo, and there are some that have, half a dozen just in that in that intro to a character or that paragraph or something like that. Additionally, one last thing on the rulebook, and then I'm going to shut up about it, but there's no single image of all the components, which I always like. Instead, they go component by component for the most part and talk about it. But like the little trays that you put the spells on, not the trays, like the tarot size cards that you put the trays on. I can't remember exactly or not, but I don't believe that has its own section where it shows you the component, like, hey, here's what this is. The reason you want a component view of everything is so that you can tell you have everything in the box. Ideally, it even gives it a name, so that's what they're referring to when they talk about that, or the placement of the spell cards in the library, or stuff like that. It just a full image of all the components and everything listed, and it doesn't have to be one image. It could, depending on your components and your breakdown and how you're titling them, it could be maybe 2 pages or whatever. But either way, you should show them all and then go into the deep dive of, okay, here's this one, here's this one, here's this one, as opposed to just skipping that part. So I always appreciate seeing a whole list of components. Now back to things I like about this game, because I'm done with the rulebook, which was rough. The map size, I think, is perfect. It's just really good. Because of how much you can move, and, again, I never played with, 2 players, but I imagine 2 players is much more whose strategy is better versus anything. But either way, it just seemed like there was enough people on the board, and you're just distanced enough to where you're not too far from anybody. You can do anything you want when it comes to interacting with people, typically. I mean, it almost feels kind of like Small World, where there's just not enough that you can't get away from people. You know, even the moment you step out of your cell, you're typically at least a move away from somebody launching a spell. And part of that's because of how you can move, part of that's because of your spell's ranges, or the fact, or lack thereof, where you can just do anything to anybody. And just, I don't know, it was a lot of fun. I really liked the size of the map. And it didn't take too much table space either, which is props for that, because games are getting bigger and bigger, it seems. Additionally, the rooms offer a lot of varied things to do when you activate them, and I really liked that. You could go and, you know, try and get new quests, or you could summon different things, or you can just try and, break rooms, or you can, be super protected, or you can fight in the arena, or you can take the first player token thing, or there's just you can draw cards. There's so much to do. I liked the variety of them. There's a lot of options that you could do when it comes to activating the map tiles, and that was a lot of fun. Really, really, really liked that. Now, one thing I kind of mentioned earlier, and I forgot to get back to it, so I'm getting back to it now, is the evocations, or the pets or spawns that you can have. And just how enjoyable those are, because they're so varied. A lot like the schools of magic and how varied they are, the evocations are as well. For instance, you can have some where you can summon an Andromeda. And Andromeda doesn't really do a lot that you would think, but with other cards, you can make her activate rooms, you can make her cast spells, so you almost have like two different mages going around. She can cast her own spells on top of the spells you've done, or she can go around and activate a room. In other words, if you don't want to spend the time to worry about activating a room to get another quest because your quest is stinky, have your Andromeda do it. That's cool. But then you also have like altars that just sit there, but then you have cards that can use the altars, and they can explode, or they can do different things, or you can get power points based off of it. And then there's, the upgraded bone knights that you can, upgrade your people and make them stronger, and then have them explode and do damage to people, and all just, there's a lot of fun to be had with the evocations. Now, I will say, because the evocations typically act at the end, there's a lot of cards that allow you to have them act right away. If somebody doesn't want to deal with it, you can probably kill an evocation before it even takes an action, which is kind of a bummer. It's like, hey, I summoned the Cerberus, but then he died like next turn. So that's always kind of a bummer. So you kind of want to plan to spawn them towards the end of the turn, where people are running out of spells, so that they might survive to the evocation phase. But either way, really liked them. They're a lot of fun. As somebody who's slightly colorblind, I always like to mention this. There is a little bit of a colorblind issue here. And I can typically, when they have the little hexagon symbol that's colored, I can typically tell blue from purple. But the activation tiles on top of the rooms that you place, the blue and purple look really close together, to where if they're not right together, I'm going to think they're both kind of blue or kind of purple. I mean, it gets a little wishy-washy for me. And so I would have liked a more obvious, representation of that. Perhaps a thick, kind of outline border of the color on the token, or just a deeper shade of purple, or a brighter shade of blue, or something like that to differentiate them, so I could tell the difference at a glance. I had to ask several people, is that blue or purple? It's kind of a rough situation there. Mainly because if you're asking about a room, a lot of times they're like, well, why do you want to know about that room? So ideally, I can figure that out on my own. Additionally, symbols work wonders. If you want the color and you want that certain shade of color, you can put a symbol on there that's unique to that color, or the position of the symbol is unique, or something like that to be more colorblind friendly. I would suggest you do that in future games, just because that helps people like me that have eyesight that it's kind of lacking at sometimes. Okay, two more things here. One is, this was just something I noticed, and that's because every game we played, the Black Rose itself seemed kind of pointless. Its events typically kind of mattered when you spawn an event, but the fact that it could possibly win the game and get more power points, and you kind of had to fight that itself, wasn't really a thing. I know there are some spells that interact with it. Perhaps if you specifically had a player doing that, it would matter, but on its own, it was nowhere close to winning. And it just, I don't know, it just seemed like a kind of a pointless step. In other words, if you're going to include, kind of the quest, if you're going to include it, I would like it to matter enough to where it earns its added complexity to the game, its added rule set. There's this step as well. Otherwise, I would have been fine almost doing a Zombicide style event card where you just spawn an event and the event does the thing and not worry about the Black Rose damaging people or even gaining power points of possibly winning and doing stuff like that. It didn't even come into play. So I guess you can just kind of ignore it anyway, but if you're going to ignore it anyway, then why even put it in the game? Again, I think there's specifically times where you might be able to do it, but I don't know if that justifies it always being there. At that point, I'd rather it just be part of that, those spell libraries, perhaps in some way, shape, or form, just seemed kind of like a little bit added bloat. Now, I want to end my pros and cons on a pro, and that is I really liked how balanced all the schools of magic were. They all act so differently, but it's hard to design a game where it's asymmetrical in gameplay. In other words, while you're all casting spells, you're doing them very different. I might just be off in my corner, getting altar set up for a combo that I'm doing, and I'm not even interacting with other people, or somebody's attacking somebody else. And that's a very different feeling of a game, just depending on the cards you're doing. But they all seemed quite, balanced, and so I really liked that. Nothing seems too crazy or out there, one way or the other, where one's like, well, why'd you ever use that, that school spell? Or, why wouldn't you always choose transmutation or, divination or whatever, or necromancy? They all seemed really, really good. And I like when you just see nothing but good objects. Anytime you feel like, oh, wow, that's awesome. I can't believe they let me do that. Oh, well, that's awesome. I can't believe they let me do that. You get to the point where especially if you have more than 4 cards, you're like, if I could play all 5 of these cards, it'd be amazing, right? You get those kind of situations where, they're just all good. So I really, really like that. For the character balance, it's close. And what I mean by that is it's just kind of a quirk in the game. So everybody attacks and moves the same 2. You move 2, you attack 2. Again, transmutation, stuff like that, you can buff it or change stuff like that, but typically those are all the same. So your two differentials are your health and how many cards you can have in your hand. Both are beneficial. Both are good. More cards in your hand mean you can do more. More health means you don't die as often. However, the health is beneficial from turn 1, round 1. It is from the start of the game, you have an advantage over somebody. If you have 2 more health than the other person, you have 2 more health for the other person for the whole game, right? I mean, that's just how that works. The card hand size is not an instant benefit. If you're choosing somebody with lower health and a higher card size, if you never play the cards or play the style where you draw cards, you never get that advantage, in which case you're always technically at a disadvantage, or you get it, but again, it's several rounds. It takes a while to be able to draw those cards. It's not a quick and easy thing. And so then only, half the game or 2/3 of the game, you have an equivalent advantage. And so that wasn't quite as balanced. However, I mean, a variance of like 2 health kind of thing isn't a huge deal anyway. And that card hand size, again, it's not a huge deal because by that time you're pretty late game and everybody has a grimoire up anyway. And so it's something I noticed conceptually looking at it. It's not something I noticed playing the game. And otherwise, everything is super balanced, and I really, really enjoyed that. I could pick any class or any school of magic and not feel like I'm picking a bad choice or that I can't do my favorite because it's not as good. All right, so conclusions. What do I think about Black Rose Wars? I really, really actually enjoyed it. Over here, I'm critiquing and I'm being opinionated. I'm giving pros and cons and there's this fault and this fault but this is good and this is good. And it's not like a 1-to-1 where, it has bad storage, but the, downtime is really good. So those cancel out. Like, it doesn't work that way. I'm just telling you how the game is. I had a lot of fun with it. As somebody who has played Magic the Gathering, as somebody who loves deck building, especially making cool combos, that's really what this game is. If you've ever done that and enjoyed it, you would love this game, because that's literally what it is. It's taking these cards and figuring out what combination you can do in what order to get that kind of win scenario, that best scenario out of that. And it was a lot of fun. It was very immersive because of all the spell titles and what it is you're doing, and it's very interesting how they all work. And it's just, again, I had a lot of fun in it. It's not a perfect game, but it is a good game. It's not a bad game, and I look forward to breaking it out, not even just to play it yet. I want to read all the spell cards and try and find other combinations and other fun and interesting ways to use those spells together to do something fun. Additionally, there was, I didn't even get into the whole, semi-cooperative of Chronos or anything like that, or all the stuff that's coming in Wave 2. This is just kind of the base game and what I think of it, and I look forward to getting to the table again. Alright guys, So that is my review of Black Rose Wars by Ludus Magnus Studio. I hope you enjoyed it. If you appreciate this kind of deep dive into the mechanics of the game with a lot of opinion thrown in, because that's what I do, is throw my opinion around like it matters, feel free to hit subscribe so you see future reviews, unboxings, painting videos, Kickstarter news updates, and all that kind of fun stuff. You can check out my channel for more of those if you haven't yet. Again, appreciate you watching. If you did see to this point, you obviously kind of enjoyed the video. Hit the like button. It's free. It helps me out. So I appreciate that. And if you disagree at all, if you have any concerns or any questions, comment down below. As always, I'd like to end by thanking my patrons. You guys are awesome and really make this worthwhile. If you didn't know, I do have a Patreon. It's as low as $1 a month, and it helps me not rely on these companies, so I'm not just generating essentially ad revenue for them by hyping up things, and instead telling you my honest feedback as a reviewer, as an unboxer, as somebody who cares about this industry, my opinion. So feel free to check that out. It has a bunch of rewards, including some custom stickers that I'm going to be sending out just for this month. So after April, time's up, and you're going to get it. So again, check that out for all the rewards I offer there, or just pitch in a bone and help out. Thanks a lot, guys, for watching. I'll talk to you soon.